Today on Fish's Call Sheet, we are diving into the world of production and producing. I have Jada Ford with me, a story producer. Welcome, Jada.
Thank you. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me.
I'm fascinated. You know, a lot of your career has been in the unscripted world, and that's a world that has grown and has kind of taken over television. So I have a lot of questions because that's one of the areas that I don't have as much experience. So you're going to be teaching me as much as teaching everybody else. We have these titles. What is this? What do people think a story producer does?
I feel like with anything producer wise, everyone's like, oh, they're the finance people, or, oh, you tell a story and they're like, where's the story in the scripted world? I mean, unscripted, because it's like, nothing's scripted. So what kind of story you're telling? But there is a story being told in unscripted, and we have to make sure that we are telling the stories especially if you have like an ensemble cast, you are still telling their stories. They all have a story arc. So we just have to make sure that we follow it, and if anything changes, it goes with our whole story arc that we had plans. Obviously unscripted, it's things can go unplanned, but we still have to tell a coherent story when you're watching the show. I think a lot of people think that when unscripted, it's like, or reality they call it too, it's you just throw them out there and there's a camera and we just follow what they do. People aren't that interesting to just follow 24 hours and that's it. It's like we have to tell the story. So I'm there from start. I'm there from the prep stages of from outlines to writing. A storyline is like she's got a party that she's planning at the end of the season. What's happening in the beginning though? Like, how are we starting this party planning phase? What kind of hiccups is she having along the way? Is anyone bugging her in between? And then is there obviously there's going to be some sort of dramatic element, to keep the viewers going. And then at the end, does this party, at the end of the 8 episodes, does this party happen?
Yeah, I'm always blown away. I think people don't give enough credit to, like, especially producers on the unscripted side and reality television in particular. You are the writer, you are the director in a lot of ways, you are everything all in one, kind of in the spot. Give it to me now. Can I figure out what's going on and how does it fit together all at once? And you've been a field producer, which I always explain to people is like, that means you're out in the field with people and you got to get as much footage as you can now. And you just got to make it all coherent as you go. And so you have to have an idea of what other people have done, what other people might be doing. And then, like you said, what the arcs are for these stories. And then some of them kind of unfold in front of you. And to be able to do all of that at once it's an incredible combination.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot. And mostly as a story producer, for most shows, not for every show, it depends on the show. Sometimes you're in the field and sometimes you're just doing post. But for a lot of shows that I've done, we have to take it from start to finish. So, I could be in the field taking notes or directing, or like, this is how this story should go, or you're prepping the cast too. Like, hey, remember last week, you weren't friends with this person. Right. So today you can't be friends with her right now until we resolve the storyline between the two of you. Then we take it into post where, like, as you see my monitor back there, where we're stringing out these episodes. So I personally work with an editor so that I know how to string together my story and put the pieces together, but editors really bring these things to life. So I work closely with, whoever I'm assigned to, or just, someone I've worked with before, and we really bring that story to life. So it is a start to finish. And then we have to do interviews. So like, we'll have to interview these cast members to take us through what they're thinking when all of this stuff is happening. Right. So they're there to tell that story too. And we have to make sure they're following the story that needs to be told. So
now, how did you fall into this world? How did you find your way into this? What brought you to the entertainment industry, and what led you down this path?
Ever since I was a little kid, I've been fascinated by television. I probably was the only kid who was like 5 years old with like a TV in her room. I was always fascinated by TV. And for a while, I actually wanted to be an actress. And then when I was about 15 or 16, I was an extra in a movie, because I grew up in Baltimore. So I was an extra in this movie called Liberty Heights. I loved it. It was cool. But I kept looking at these people behind the scenes, like calling the shots, like doing really cool stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, like I want to do something like this. Like this looks really cool. This is the path that I want to take.
Mhm.
And so I started taking, I went to college, and after I graduated, I stayed in Maryland for a little while, but the only thing you could really do there is like news. News wasn't really my thing. And so I was like, I think I need to come out to LA. Like, I think I have to do it because that's where people go. So I left, and I did a couple like independent films, as a PA, just kind of working around, working for free, taking temp jobs while I'm trying to break in the business. And I met someone who was trying to get in touch with an old boss of his, or old colleague of his. And he ended up making friends with the assistant. And I was like, dude, I have got to get back to Maryland because like I'm not working. I'm just here, but I don't want to go back either because I've seen a lot of people just leave. So he connected me with the assistant, and she put me on my very first show, Surreal Life, for VH1. Forgive the pun, but so surreal too, because it was like, that was the first set I've been on. It was a reality show. And I honestly, Michael, I thought that reality shows were going to be temporary.
Right.
I thought they were going to be like, around for like a year or two. And I was like, I'll just do this for a little while, and then I'll work my way into scripted. But no, it's still here.
Yeah, well,
like,
a lot of people felt that way. It's so funny. The old school people in the industry all kind of had that reaction. It's like, oh man, it'll be a craze for like a year or two. They had no concept, but I think a big part of that is they had no concept of how good the storytelling was going to be and how much they would be able to kind of weave and connect people. Because we'd all experienced people who thought they were funny or thought they were entertaining on their own, who were okay in short stints, but no one expected people to really be able to maintain that. And I think a large part of that goes hand in hand with what you do now, is shaping, sculpting, creating content, not just showing up with a camera and pointing and hoping something happens.
Exactly. And that's the biggest misconception, is that people think that we just show up. I've worked with actors like yourself who we've done these shows, or it might be a little a stint or like a little gig or a little something. Sometimes just we're like, oh, well, why do we have to wait, or why do we have to do whatever, where they're like, it's unscripted. And I'm like, I know, but there's still like a whole method to our madness. And I think it's a definitely an underrated side, because reality does have a stigma that goes with it as well, but there's also some really cool projects and docuseries and stuff that have come out of it that makes it like, okay, I feel good about what I do.
Well, it's interesting because like any job, right? There are jobs, I mean, acting jobs too. There are jobs that you work on where you're just so lucky because you realize the depth of what you get to do. And then there are other jobs that kind of are either over the top or silly or goofy, or sometimes you're like, well, I'm not in love with this, but it is the job that is here now, and I'm going to do the best I can in it. And I think sometimes we undermine just the value of doing just quality work all the time. And I think that's something you and I share is, okay, if this is the project, then I'm going to be the best I can in this project, and then give my best to the next thing. And if it's not what fulfills me, then I'll build something bigger, which is really what you've been doing in your career.
Yeah, that's really good. Sometimes I have done shows, like you just said, where I'm kind of like, why am I doing the show? But that has actually ended up taking me to other places, and it's also, it's like in our industry as a whole, it's the connections that you make with the people that you work with. I make sure that like when I'm on set, like I speak to the PA, or the person it doesn't matter to me, because it's like, one, I was there in their shoes at one point, picking up the trash and, getting coffees and all that stuff like that. But just also like, we're all doing something, no matter like, or how big or how small the job may seem, like we're all contributing to make one thing awesome. When you have those relationships, it kind of carries on to the next show, because sometimes you're working with the same people. I mean, I had a PA once, a production assistant once, who ended up being like my boss later on in life. So it's just like, you never know, but
Right.
They remembered, how you were and how you treated them on set. And we all need to just be kind to each other and, make sure, everyone's job is important.
I agree. I grew up in this business, and it's very interesting growing up from the actor side. I would have other people come in, people who played my friends on the show or other characters or outside, and they would come in. And I think they were always shocked because we were pretty close with our crew and we were very connected. And I was always really closely connected to my crew. It's kind of partially what led to this. And I was always struck by how arrogant sometimes people were or how they would look down on people. And I'm like, if ever there was a business, the PA today could be the executive producer on the next gig in 6 months, and you don't know. And you really don't. So if ever you needed a reason to treat people well, I mean, you should treat them well anyway. But if ever you needed an extra reason, it's like you have no idea who the next person's going to be or what their next job is. And people skyrocket in this business, and they go from struggling and picking up trash one day to being the executive producer or being in charge of a network sometimes. And you're just like, wow, you're like, okay, I don't have that problem. You don't have that problem because we just treat people well and treat them the same anyway.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. That's exactly right. All the time.
What is the best part of your job, Jada, when you're producing? What's the best part?
The best part of my job, and I don't do it much anymore like I used to, but is the traveling, because there's a lot of places that I've been able to see and experiences I've been able to have. Not saying that I wouldn't do it in my personal life, but I may not have gotten to it, at that point. And so like for me, it's the places and it's the experience. I mean, one of the jobs I had that I thought was really cool, I worked on Hell's Kitchen with Gordon Ramsay, and I did a couple seasons of the show, but my first season on his show, he was teaching us how to shuck scallops. Like he literally just brought it over and just came over to the producers and was like, here's how you learn how to shuck scallops. And I'm like, this is so cool. So not that I'm shucking scallops ever, but you know what I mean? But like anytime I was scallop though, I'm like, Gordon Ramsay taught me how to shuck a scallop. So that's honestly, that's a big part of it. But some part is like, just being able to help people tell their stories too. I've done some really feel good shows as well, where people are having a struggle or something, and someone comes in and makes their life a little better that day. I think it's really cool. Just all the stories and just meeting people, it's just opened my world up a lot.
I think people's stories are fascinating. And I think one of the areas that doesn't get enough credit when it comes to like unscripted reality television is when you're really telling somebody's meaningful story. And I think sharing someone's visceral, real journey, their challenges, because I think we all share a lot of those challenges, whether it be as a parent, whether it be having a loved one who's sick, or somebody who has faced something and has anxiety, depression, frustration, anger, guilt, any of those things. I think people have all felt those things. So when you can feel it and transcend that through, I think there's something special. That's what the reality television I like. That's the stuff that, my writing partner and we pitch is more, I like to call it more like uplifting or inspirational because that's kind of more my style. But it's really interesting. What does that feel like as a producer to know I'm being trusted with their whole life, their story for the world?
It can be intimidating too, in a way, because it's like you get to a point where you care about that person and you want to make sure that you're doing them right by telling the story that needs to be told. Right. And then because they also put their trust in you and they're being vulnerable and opening up their heart and to the world, and it can be very nerve-wracking for them. So I think it feels good to be able to tell those good stories, like you said. And I always try to make cast members and or people, subjects, or whoever we're with feel good, feel comfortable. Like, hey, we're doing a show, we're not saving lives, but actually some of these some of the feel good ones, yeah, we might be actually. But it's just, if you're putting your trust that we're gonna do your story justice, then I want to make sure that we do it and tell it the way that it should be told. Obviously, there are some, network type things, but a lot of times we've been able to push back as well. This is not really their story, so let's tell it the right way. And sometimes you do have to push back because it is still your project, it's still your storytelling, and it's still, yes, you are part of a team, but it's still like, I get assigned to episodes. So if I'm assigned to 4 episodes out of the series, then I'm going to make sure the story is being told in the right way, and we should all be following kind of like the same way. So
Can we touch on that for a moment? You know, we all get oversight. I think people in outside of our business don't realize how much oversight really happens, whether it be a production company. I mean, we all have like layers, right? So it's like, you know, you have your executives on your show or your showrunner, then you have the network. The network has a parent company at times that will come in and sometimes they're late to give you information. Like they come in late and say, oh, you know, that thing, you know, you're 2 episodes down the road in this, but we're not okay with that. So you're going to have to vary that. That's the nightmare, especially in an unscripted world, because you've moved on. You know, how does that work for you and how do you manage that?
It sucks because we have seen a lot of scenes that we shot that have to go on the cutting room floor. Sometimes they end up getting resurrected depending on how they want the story to be told. We do get a lot of that as well, where we've done an episode or two already. It's gone through them multiple times, you know, because I don't know, maybe I should explain. If we cut something, we do something, we have our story. Then we have this internal kind of rough cut that we do that we share within the production company. So it's like, okay, they give their little notes, we come back, we fix the notes. Okay, then it's got to go to the network. There's about 3 rounds, you know, through the network, and they're giving notes. And then it has happened where they wanted to restructure the entire show. And you're kind of like, okay, and they want you to do it still within that network turnaround that you're supposed to do it. And, you know, and it takes a couple of days to get notes. Sometimes you do fight back because you're like, well, this is, you know, we've been telling the story one way, and it's a group effort. It's not just like me back here being like, hey, we're not telling, you know, it's like, this is how we felt as the production and production company. And this is really their story. Or I hate to say it, sometimes you do just you're kind of like, all right, and you just do what you're supposed to do. It's just a weird blurred line because it's like you do want to stand up for what you know is the real storytelling, you know, but then there's a whole network aspect. So it becomes a conversation, a discussion.
Yeah, and I know too, from my friends who work in unscripted, sometimes the story you think you're telling or the person you think this show is going to be about, it becomes very clear someone else is just much more dynamic and they become the storyline. How do you make that switch? How do you, and what is it that triggers that for you? And then how do you know when it's time to like, oh, we need to make an adjustment here?
Funny that's actually something we're kind of going through right now, but we have, you know, an ensemble cast. There's 7 people that they, you know, are the main people, and then you have a couple additional characters that are there, and one of our additional characters, who wasn't even supposed to be the main one, is the one that's really bringing us the story and the oomph. You can have everything that's shot and still shot, but you end up telling it from their point of view and their perspective, and it ends up being like their story. So it happens, and we just, as a story person, we have to navigate that and narrate it and tell the story from that other person. And so it's more interviews maybe from that person, even just a couple changes in your cut where it's a reaction, more reactions from that person. It's the beauty of editing, you know? So it happens, and we do change it, and it's like a lot of this time with unscripted, you do have to go with the flow because you are on a deadline as well. So it's like, you know, if we got to change it a little bit to be that person, then yeah, it's just little elements that you can do to make it their story.
Now, what's one of the stories that you've gotten to tell where you look back now and you go, I'm so happy I was a part of that one? Something that sticks out from your career where you're like, man, I'm so happy I was there for that or got to share that.
There is a show that I worked on called Thanks a Million, and it is a 7-minute show. And we follow these 3 stories in one setting, you know, one episode. And it's, the premise of it is this person is like, you know, I really want to thank someone who was amazing, who did, you know, XYZ for me. And I want to show them with, you know, $100,000 and something. And then that person, it's like a chain of kindness. So that person will nominate someone, and that person will nominate someone. But the thing is, the catch, also as the producer, the catch is you can't tell them anything. You can't tell them like someone's going to give you money, someone, whatever, they have to trust you. You're like, hey, someone said you were doing a great job, you're meant so much to this person. One that sticks in my mind is celebrity gifts. That was the first one they give to the story. It was a woman who ran this program where she helped kids in underserved like area communities learn STEM.
Mhm.
And she was a teacher, she was a principal, but then she left because she really wanted to help these kids in her community. When COVID hit, the kids couldn't be a part of it, the program. So she made, and this is before all the virtual learning kind of started happening, but she still did it, still did the STEM program, still handed out like all the materials, still did everything with her own money. And she lost her job. So she was doing everything with her own money. And even if she was struggling, she still found a way to help families who were struggling even more to do this. And so when she received her money, to help someone else, it was a good story. But the pulling on the heartstrings was she wanted to thank this couple who they were retired, they worked at a hospital, they volunteered at a hospital, they were retired, and they helped a lot of patients. They taught dance to a lot of like widows and people who just lost, people who had been in the hospital for cancer and other sicknesses. But it was mostly for the widows because these people, their spouses would pass away. And so they had something fun for them to do. But when COVID hit, they had to leave the hospital and they weren't offering the program anymore. So they started doing kind of like a Zoom, no money. They just, took their time out and did it. And then they also put together packets and all the stuff for the homeless that they hand out every week. And then they helped people, would help raise money to get kids scholarships, just helping people in their community get scholarships. When they were thanked, that's when I was like crying because the husband and the wife were crying and I'm sitting here on set like, because it was such a beautiful story. It's like people were doing so many kind things and they were just like, I never thought that anyone would thank me because I just do it. They just do it. But to get that extra step and that extra help or just the recognition, that's what brings it all.
Yeah, that's the part I think that unscripted television doesn't get enough credit for, is the moments where you bring communities together, where you really can change somebody's life, and where we're used to dealing with people who have been in the business for a long time or professional actors. It hits different in an unscripted environment because it is someone's personal story and their life is changing and they're not going to move on to the next script. This is their life and it's forever changed from this moment.
Yeah, it's their story and that's it. Yeah, they don't have to, they're not acting. So yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's rewarding. It's rewarding in a lot of ways. It really is. It's more so than I ever thought it would be. So when I first started it, we didn't have shows that were feel-good shows like this. We had shows where it was just drama. Like all the shows were just, which is, can be entertaining, and some people do it just for fun. So that's why we get that stigma where reality's fake. It is very produced in a way, but we're still shaping stories. It has to be produced because otherwise, then we're just watching some.
Yeah, it wouldn't be very entertaining.
Wasting a lot of people's time and money.
Yeah. What's the hardest part then? Because of all of that, what's the hardest part for you?
The hardest part, aside from the long hours, because, we do long hours, and it's like, or at least for me, it doesn't get checked at the door. Like if I know that something has to be, get out or be done, or something's on my mind for the next one, it's just like, it's always on my brain. That's always the hardest part because I don't sometimes separate it. The other part is separating yourself though from what's actually happening. That's a hard part too sometimes. The other part is honestly sometimes talent because I've definitely had a show before where the talent, either they were always late or always not wanting to cooperate, and and they'd be one of our biggest ones that we need to focus on. So sometimes it's talking them off a ledge, being their confidant, or just sometimes like, we got to shoot this. Like we're spending a lot of money today, bringing this whole crew out here and for you, and you're not being, respectful or responsive or, whatever. And so that's sometimes the hardest part, because people sometimes don't want to come to set or don't want to work or want to take time. And it's like, if we take too much time, then we're going into overtime. Like, you realize that you're costing us money. So that can be stressful. It's also stressful when locations have to change last minute.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing, because we spend a lot of time, one, location scouting, two, making sure that location is good for us for the story. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's like, they feel like sometimes we just go into a location and we're shooting. It's like, we have to make sure that location fits with our story. And, and you're doing a lot of work with production, the production coordinator, production management team, to like get a permit for this place or sign off on this place. So it's definitely a lot. So when locations have to change last minute, it's like,
yeah,
it's
a nightmare.
Like,
it's a nightmare. I always tell people, the one thing that people don't realize in reality or unscripted television is, when you go walking down a street or you're filming in a location, you have to pull permits, you have to get approval, because you can't just like sneak that onto the air and pretend it didn't happen, because especially in an area like LA, everybody knows, and those cities will come back to you later and be like, you were here and we have proof. So, and then you pay the price for it. So you can't do it that way. You really have to own up and get approval and get space and get permits and do all this stuff. So it's a lot more to it. So especially if you have a limited amount of time in a space, if the people who are on camera don't want to get to work right when they need to, sometimes you're like, we have 2 hours in this space. I need you to come out and do things now. Actually, I need you to do it an hour ago. So let's go, get out.
And then I've been on that end too, where you're working with the venue and you're like, can we just like another hour? Like, where and because also some of these places are literally stopping their business for us to shoot. And so when you're encroaching on time that we said we're not going to be in, and then we need that space, it's all ripple effects. It's all literally like, and then it's like, we want to be able to shoot here again, maybe, but if we're not good on their, if we're not on good terms with them, they're going to be like, forget it, you're not coming back.
Yeah, you can't burn a location, especially if it's someplace you think you need multiple times. And you're like, and that's where sometimes the people on camera, and this is scripted, unscripted, it goes across the board. So that's where sometimes the people on camera have to be aware of, like, when you're shooting on a location, you're shooting in a place, you got to get a certain amount done. So it's fine if you're having a bad day, or we all have stuff that happens in our lives, but when it comes time to work, you got to step up and do it, because we may have only one shot at some of these things, and you got to get in and you got to pull it off, because we can't burn the location.
That's 100% right. And I mean, it's that, or it's like, we have this person that was supposed to shoot with us, with the team, we have our regular cast, but then we have a guest person that can only shoot for like an hour. And it's like, we can't get them back because they, what I mean? It's like, it's all perfectly, if it's good when you have a well-oiled machine, but everyone has to do their job in order to make it that way, because we don't, like you said, it's time, money, but then it's time.
Without using any names, what's one of the strangest things you've seen on set?
Oh yeah.
In our head, the first thing that goes through is all the stories you can't tell. There's usually the first thing that runs through my mind. I'm like, yeah, can't do that one.
And I hate to say any of the fighting stuff, because I've definitely had to break up fights in shows, which is not fun. Right. It's actually the worst.
Well, I think, can we touch on that for a second?
Yeah, please.
I think that's one of those things that people think that as a producer, you're hoping that a fight breaks out. And the truth couldn't be any further from that, because no one benefits from a real fight where people don't like each other, for two reasons. The first one is you have no control over what's about to happen, and it wreaks havoc on your whole schedule. But then people don't get over it right away like they do in television and movies. So now your schedule, and there's so much more that goes into it. Like, you don't want a real fight. You want people to argue maybe at a moment, or have a moment of contention, and then move on.
Yeah, and we've had some, I've done some shows where there have been some major blowouts, like physical fights, even as a I mean, a lot of times we have security, we have to bring security with us because some of these, it's not up to the producer really to stop these, but sometimes we had to be in the middle of them. But yeah, when someone completely fights for real or even argues or has some issue and we're supposed to shoot some happy scene with them the next day and they hate each other. And now we're like, okay, we have to change the story like big time because it just changes the whole dynamic. Yes, they do like fights. Yes, there's certain things where we do want, but if we're supposed to if someone's fighting and we're supposed to have a whole wedding or something that we planned, that literally either throws away our location and the money and time that was put into either booking that changes our story completely because you can't fake that. I mean, it's not to segue too much, but even when I'm doing interviews and I'm interviewing people and if they're super tired or if they're super not into it or whatever, you're not going to get the right response from them. And it's you have to call it where you're like, okay, I can't waste my time on these questions or this question because you're not going to give me the right response. And it's going to come off really fake on television too. That has happened to me though multiple times where people have been in fights, they hold grudges, and then we're like, but tomorrow you're going to be best friends. And it's but we're not because now I don't like them. Right. So yeah.
Yeah, you can't unring that bell. You can't unsay that thing. And if you hit somebody, they don't look the same tomorrow. So you better keep some kind of semblance of control of yourself because at the end of the day, this isn't everything in your whole world, but it could be if you do something really dumb.
Absolutely, exactly. And it's not to name names or anything, but there are some places though that really like to have that drama and they don't care, and they thrive off of it and and it doesn't matter if it changes their story, whatever, because they got to fight. And so now, it's whatever, but I have worked on shows like that before in the past, but over the past few years, I've tried to stay away from shows like that and do more feel good stuff. So I haven't had those fights or those grudges. But so that's been good. Lately, I've been trying to work on more positive type shows. So I try to focus on more shows where I feel good at the end of the day. Right. Producing, because some of those shows that are exciting for viewers to watch weigh heavily a lot on the producers and the production team. I always say the crazier the shows are, the worse it is for the people who are in the field. Been trying to stay more for feel good shows and that way with my kids, if they watch any of this stuff ever one day, right. Then I'm I did that show instead of I did that show.
No, I totally get it. And I think that's a big part of some of the stuff that I want to do and make. And so I think that's a good way for us to transition because you're transitioning through your career, growing through this transition. You've moved kind of all the way through the business and now you are making and creating content through Black Vintage Media.
The reason why I started it is because a few years ago, after I had kids, I was kind of in a weird career rut. I still wanted to do TV. I still wanted to work in television. I still wanted to do this. But I was also I'm really tired of seeing shows that there's not a lot of good representation for people of color.
Right.
And so my biggest thing was I want to find those people and help them tell their stories. I created the company, I created Black Vintage Media to do just that. And so how I find my people, there's something that I want to see. I got into RVs one day, right? And I was man, I haven't seen a show about RVs. Just looking and I'm is there a great couple out there? And so I'm on Instagram and I literally reach out to people on Instagram or social media and I'm hey, I think what you're doing is cool. I'm happy. Have you ever thought about doing a TV show? And I try to explain I'm legit. I'm not a crazy person. Just, look me up. I do work in television. So I started doing that. And I have 2 shows right now that are in development because just to tell these stories. And it's about people of color. And it's positive stuff. It's I got just really tired of us being represented on camera where we're fighting or where, there's some dramatic aspect or or the one sport that we can do or it's etc where it's we are doing other things
Right.
It's just not being celebrated, or it's just not being, it's not normalized. And I want to make sure it is. So that's why I agree.
Yeah, we shared that vision and mission. I looked at your business model and talking about inclusion and diversity and positive representation. It's something my writing partner and I talk about all the time, because one of the things is, we always say we write stories that are about people that happen to be from what would be considered minority viewpoints or diverse viewpoints, but they're people first. And I think that's the part where people have lost track of this is, I don't want some kind of stereotypical or preconceived notion. I think this is the thing is, people are doing everything in every community. There are people who are doing amazing things. And the whole point is, if you think everybody who does RVing looks one way, or everybody who plays a sport looks one way, or everyone who is into dance, or whatever your passion is, if you think there's not diversity in that group, then you're not either looking hard enough or paying attention. I'm with you. I want to see positive, passionate exploration and representation of that.
Yeah. And it's also like for my kids who are little, it's like I want them to be able to know that they can achieve something, because other kids look like them or doing the same thing. One of the shows I have is around animals and stuff, and the people who the characters who are a part of this animal life. But, one of my biggest thing was when I was a kid, my white friends would ride horses. And I was like, oh, I probably can't do that because that's not like, not that it was ever discouraged, but I just felt like, oh, that's not what Black people do. We just don't ride, which is dumb, but it's the representation that I hadn't seen. And so I was like, oh, we just don't ride horses. But, when you start looking at stuff and like the urban cowboys and all the stuff like that, I'm like, everybody rides horses. Why would I ever think that? But it's just because we just don't see it,
Right. It's not prevalent, and we don't see it and we don't highlight it. And unless you're around it, and that's part of this, is showing a deeper world. You should be able to dream for any of these things. Or just because you haven't seen someone who looks like you do it yet, doesn't mean you can't, doesn't mean you're excluded from it. There are people who are doing it, and you just have to look a little deeper. I think that's the beauty of social media and connection. If we're doing it right in the media, we start to show a more realistic view of the world.
Yep. That's exactly, yes.
And I love it. I mean, I think being inspired by your kids, I think is a big thing. I think over the years, my kids have inspired me. I've been a coach, and coaching along the way, I've been shocked. Like, when I started coaching travel ball, I didn't go to a big organization that tried to hire me, because I actually started a group that was local or inner city kids who previously couldn't have afforded that kind of opportunity. It was shocking to me, not just that people didn't think they could do it, but also the reaction of some of the other teams when we'd go and play, because we were so much more diverse. We were primarily, African American or Latino, and people would look at us when we would come in, and they had judgments. Our hair was different, our style was a little different, and I was always like, no, you be you, because your game will speak for itself, right? We know how to play the game, and that's the part that's going to matter. But I was always blown away by how much extra garbage we went through, and that I really felt it was important for me to help these kids who were passionate about the game stay in the game long enough that people didn't chase them anymore to get rid of them, but instead started chasing them because they wanted them on their team, right? And it was like, be valued for what you have and your skill, as opposed to being judged by what you look like or somebody else's stupid preconceived notion.
Yep, I love that so much. No, I think that's fantastic of you to do that. And I think it's so cool. And I think, like you said, you could have gone to a bigger company or bigger group, but you were like, no, you're focusing on this group. And I think that attention is even better. So I think that's really cool. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do and still trying to do. And, and continue telling these stories and getting them out there. Like I just want these things to come off and look normal. It needs to be normal. It needs to be normalized.
Until you can see that this is a possibility for you, it's really hard to imagine yourself in there, or it's hard to tell somebody that that's what you want to do. And I think as we look through history, now we're crossing those roads. Minority groups and orientation is starting to cross. But it wasn't that long ago women were not given rights that were considered just normal for men. And it took us a long time to make that transition. And the transition is so, for those of us who are up front and watching it and want to see it change, is painfully slow. But it starts with representation. It starts with people feeling like they're included and that they have not just a chance to be heard, but a seat at the table and that they can make progress.
Yep.
And so it kills me because, it's the frustration I have of like, don't tell me it could happen. Don't tell me you'd like to help. Let's just do it, hire people, and let's get moving, right? Like, let's just do it.
That's what I'm doing. Exactly. And that's what I'm doing. I'm like, I'll just tell the stories then, because if I can, if no one else is, or if I'm not seeing it, it's like, instead of me just complaining about like not seeing it, it's like, then do it. I'm just going to do it.
Was that the dream for you in creating this company and what you want to do next? Is that your vision, that you want to kind of change the way you see the world in front of you?
That is exactly what I'm trying to do. And I think the thing is, with the unscripted side that I have, all that experience, helped get me to here. That's what I want to do. And I'm still doing it, even if I'm taking on another show or another job or something, I still want to make sure like the representation is being there, being told the right way. So, yeah.
I love it. I also think it's so important. Producing is such an important aspect, and to have producers who look like the society that we come from. Because if you've never been in a group or been involved, you don't understand all the layers that go into it, what that experience is like. No one has the universal view of what the experience is for anyone, but you also don't even know the things you don't know. If you've never been in a community, been in a group, been in an environment, been in a culture. And so to have producers who really, this is not just our story, but it is the story of all of us together. But let me tell you where I come from. That's so valuable, because it's not just being heard, it's the opportunity to show you what you're missing.
And it wasn't until, I would say, maybe a couple years ago, but a lot of times I've been on sets where I've been the Black producer, the one, or we'd have shows around like, an African-American cast, but there was no one on my side, it was just me. And I'm like, not that I can speak for every Black person, but I was like, if there were a little bit more of us, for representation, we might have some similar stories or backgrounds that we share, maybe not. But like, if I'm coming onto a set, like the show I'm on right now, it's super diverse. It's like women have these roles and, they're the higher ups, and so nice to go. And I'm like, it is an ensemble Black cast, but the diversity amongst the entire team, I'm talking like from producer, director, PA to craft services, like everything is like super diverse. And that's what I love. And that's what we need more of. And, it's getting there, and certain things that I've been on, it's getting there. It should be more normal, but it
shouldn't be where you and I are surprised when we get to a set that's fully diverse. And I think, but it's our job. And you're taking the forefront. I'm trying to take the forefront of leading in that direction, because you just want to hire good people and you want the diversity of the world that you live in to be shown and be included both in front of and behind the camera. I mean, we should be showing the tapestry should be the same on both sides. And if you're not, you're going to miss a huge part of the story.
Yeah, like 100%. It's really, it boggles my mind that this is the conversation that we're having to have, because we don't see it yet, or see much of it. I mean, it's there, it's getting there, but it should have been there.
Right. Well, it's sad that it's taken this long.
Right.
But it's nice that people are kind of supporting in the way that you're starting to see more allies. You're starting to see more people being invested, and it bodes well for the future, because it's a brighter future if we're all lifting each other up.
Agreed. 100%.
All right, Jada, what is the first thing you look for on a call sheet?
A lot of times, this is dumb, the weather. Because we put the weather on there. Just need to make sure. Also who I'm working with, because it depends on the show. But that's a good one. But yeah, the weather's so dumb. But it's true. Because I'm like, if we're gonna go outside and shoot, like I just want to make sure that, because also weather does affect a lot of things. If we were gonna have this outdoor picnic and then it's all of a sudden we find out it's raining today, then we're like, we've lost it. But isn't that crazy? That's the first thing I look at.
No, it makes perfect sense to me, especially in the unscripted world where you're moving around and shooting things in multiple locations and things are going fast and furious. Weather is a huge disruptor, so it makes perfect sense. All right, now on the flip side, what is the last thing you want to see on a call sheet?
The last thing I want to see?
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know. I've never thought about like what would I not want to see on there? Maybe an early call time.
Hey, that makes perfect sense to me.
A very early call time. Although I say I have more tolerance now because I feel like I'm just up. But there was a time where I was like, and it doesn't even seem that early to me now, but I'd be like 6 a.m. We gotta be there at 6. But you're just like, now I'm like 6 a.m. I'll be there at 5 if you want me to.
Right. Well, it's different, especially once you've had kids, right? Because in the old days, you're like, I might be getting to bed kind of late. Now you're like, they will have already woken me up twice. So that's perfectly fine.
A lot of times going to set is my escape. So terrible.
What's your favorite thing to see at craft services?
Oh my gosh. You know what's so funny? So craft services is like literally the gateway to stuff that you don't buy in your house. And you're like, I'm not going to eat this. Like, I don't eat cookies. I don't eat whatever. And then you get the craft service. You're like, oh my God, these cookies look so good. It's not the same as it, or at least in my world, it's not the same that it used to be, because now, because of COVID and all the stuff, it's like you're getting prepackaged stuff. Right. But let me tell you, when I was doing some shows, and craft services is like, right, sometimes you're there because you're bored. Sometimes you're there because you're like, I've been working late, lunch hasn't come yet, let me go, whatever. So craft services, it's always for me, I don't know why. It's always the peanut M&Ms, and it's always just cookies, like any type of cookie, because I don't eat them. But then on shoot days, I will be going to town. Right.
Okay, so on the flip side of that, what's the last thing you want to see at craft services?
As much as I'm like super healthy, I don't want to look at apples. Like, I love fruit, but like, I feel like that just takes away from the whole crafty experience. So fruit. Jada
Ford, after all these years, how do you define success?
My definition of success has definitely changed. When I was really young, it was like, everybody's going to know my name and we're going to be, I'm going to make a lot of money and it's whatever. Lately, my definition of success is having a goal and being able to achieve it. So even if it's a little goal, no matter how little, no matter how small or big it is, it's just having a goal and being able to achieve it, or at least go for it. Because, failure is always, I've definitely failed at stuff, and I never thought of it as a setback, because sometimes those failures have kind of put me into directions that I should be in. And they've gotten me in good places, actually. So I just feel like success is, doing what you want to do, doing what you love, doing what you set out to do. And even if you tried and it didn't work, as long as you tried it. So for me, that's honestly a success for me, is making sure I achieve, even the smallest goal.
Yeah, I always tell people, maybe it's because I grew up in this business, but failing is kind of this weird thing. And I was a baseball coach for a long time, and failure is this really interesting thing because people are terrified of it. But I always feel like if you don't fail, then you didn't really try. You didn't try all out or big enough. So I always tell people my goal is to fail stupendously, but never lose my enthusiasm. Like, that's the trick, is can you fail so massively that other people joke about it or tease you about it later and not lose your enthusiasm or your passion for what you're doing?
Well, I mean, also failure, it's like a sign of you actually trying and you actually doing it. That was one of the things that brought me, when I came out here to California for the first time, I was in my early 20s. And I remember when I was leaving my town, there were a lot of people that were like, oh, I know someone that went out to LA. They tried to do it. They didn't. They failed. They came back. And I was like, well, even if I do, at least I'm going out there to do it instead of being like some people who were like, man, I give you props for going out there and trying. Failure sometimes at the moment sucks because you're like, oh, I didn't, whatever. But then I'm telling you that it's like, well, I tried. And that way, next time either try again or I tried it, I'm good. I don't need to try it anymore.
Try it different. So many areas of my life and my career, my success was born out of a really embarrassing or terrible failure that taught me, okay, well, this part works. That part was right. This part was wrong. Now I know why I failed. So now I'm going to adjust this. And then the next time, maybe I adjust one more thing. People never see, they see success and they think, you're an overnight success. And I laugh at our business a lot of times, we're like 10 or 20-year overnight successes, right?
Yeah. People always do think that sometimes where they're like, oh, they just came out of nowhere. It's like, no, that person's been working for like 20 years. They're just finally getting the recognition that,
right.
That's happened too, where even just getting promoted sometimes, and people are like, well, what were you doing before? And you're like, no, I was getting coffees and I was picking up trash for people. And then, I just took those steps to get to where I am. But, we are in this business and we have been, I know some longer than others, but like, it's never an overnight thing. I mean, it may happen one or two people, but like, think of all the stuff that we go through and try. And it's like, if you get on a hit show or, you do something amazing and it's like, oh, that person. Oh yeah. And then you see you can even look them up and you're like, oh my God, they used to be on that show I watched or, and I didn't recognize them or know them because now they're bigger or something. So.
All right, now how do you measure up to your definition of success?
I mean, you mean me as like personally, like how I feel once
Well, I love that you said that it's about achieving a goal, right? It's about setting a goal and achieving it. So it sounds like from what I'm witnessing is you're setting a lot of goals and you're thinking outside the box and you're raising not just diversity and representation, but you're raising new projects and new perspectives. So it sounds like you really are achieving each one of those goals in kind of different successive orders. Do you feel like you're reaching that success?
I do. I feel like sometimes like I had to look back at like when I wanted to come do this, where I was like, when I wanted to come, to LA and do stuff. And it's so funny, like several years ago, it kind of seemed like just a dream, and being able to actually do it and have this dream and set these goals, but being able to do and achieve is like huge. And like sometimes in the midst, in the mix of it, you're kind of like, you're just doing it and you don't think. But then sometimes like I do sit back and I'm like, wow, like look what I'm doing. Like I wish, I would have told myself, when I was 18, if I thought I'd be here doing what I'm doing, I would have probably laughed at myself. I'd be like, no, that's not going to happen right now. So I love what I do. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it is what it is, but there's like nothing else that I want to do career-wise, really. I mean, there's, you always got to find your like little path because in this art industry is so big that it does help to have a couple skills in this business. And, just like you're writing and it's like, you have to be multi-layered. You have to have more layers. Like that's the way I think that's the way that you have longevity because, I could say, hey, I'm a story producer, but there's a lot of story producers who don't know how to edit and string stuff out on Avid. And they miss out on jobs because they didn't learn that or, whatever. And it's like, but that's how I work because I learned all of that. Right. So I think it's helpful to put your feet in everything. And that's the one beauty about this. And that's the one good thing, like going back to what I said about really getting to know people and know other people in your business, because it's like, maybe one day I want to pick up a camera, but I might need a little help. But my camera person, I've been best friends with this person, said they would help me. Or, I met this person on set and, they said, you can shadow me or work with me. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff. That's the awesome thing about this industry too. Yes, you do have your egos, and yes, you do have some people who, don't want to help. But I do think because there's so many routes and stuff we can take that, I'm good. I love being here.
Yeah, there are, in everything, there's good and bad people. But this business, by and large, is collaborative, and it's made up of a lot of dreamers with truly unique vision of life and the world and everything around them. And I love it because that's where some of my best ideas come from. That's where I gain knowledge. It's not just what people do, it's how they look at it and the way that they change the way things are done or the way that they look at an aspect of this business. And I'm like you, I like one skill is not enough. I want to learn a lot, and I want to learn from everybody, and I want to always be picking up new things. And I'll pick on somebody from 10 years ago and say, hey, we talked about this. Are you still doing that? Are you still interested in doing that? Because I want to learn and I'm in. And I think that's where you continue to grow and find new things.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's always any field. It's like try something else or add something to your list of skills that you could do. I think that's a kind of across the board, and I'm glad to be doing it. And I'm sure maybe next year I'll want to do something else that's cool, in this business. But right now this is where I am, and who knows next year.
Well, that's the beauty of it too, is it could be anything. There is no 100% limit. Like, this is not the only job you can have. It's one of the beautiful things is that rise can go as far as your imagination and your willingness to work and all those things kind of combined. What is the thing that you wish you could have on every set?
This is going to sound, honestly, respect, because I just think, and I mean that both ways. Like, I just want a crew and a team, and by team, I mean like all of us, to just have respect for each other, because, in the end, we're all creating the same project, and we're all, all here for the one thing. So no need to be mean to that person who's helping you look good in this aspect, and you're helping us look good in this aspect. So yeah, respect.
Yeah, respect is a huge thing for me. And it's like one of the only reasons I would ever leave a project. I don't really leave anything in the middle, but if I ever was to leave stuff, that's the two things that I always tell people are the only reasons I'd leave a job is if respect is something that doesn't occur there, or if there's some kind of ingrained bias or prejudice and people are not being treated fairly. If people are not being treated equitably, and I feel like I cannot change it, because my first step is to try and change it from within. And then my next step is, okay, then I can't be here and be a silent contributor. And so those are always been my things, and respect is huge. I think it's the most beautiful answer.
Yeah, thank you. Because it's true though, it's true, and plus I feel like if you have to go to work like that, and you work on a project, or, you're working months or weeks, with people, it's like not having that is really going to put a damper on the whole time, your whole experience while you're there. You know what I mean? And for that, it's like, yeah, you're right. There's nothing I've walked away from, but there has been something where I decided like not to go back,
right.
To work for this person, because I just overall didn't have a good experience with them, or I didn't think, they were great to other people, or, et cetera. And I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. So
you have to know when you've tried your best to make it work, and then it's just not the right place for you anymore, right? Like, you have to kind of have that, you have to know where that line is. Yeah. And then it's time to go find the next adventure. And to me, I always feel like that's when it's time for you to move on and grow someplace else.
Absolutely.
Okay, now what's the one thing you would eliminate from every set?
COVID restrictions.
Yeah, right now I'm with you. Like that probably is the best answer anybody's ever given, because if we could, man, it has changed and impacted everything.
It has. It's like, the thing, it's like, it's hard because like, yes, we all get tested and, you know, get whatever, but it's like, that just, it does take the camaraderie down a little bit
Mhm.
because, you know, we're like, well, we're standing over here, but hey girl, you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
usually, you know, you're in these circles or you always you have to be apart or, and I know this is, we have to do this and I'm not against it at all. And plus there's some people that can't work or do their jobs because, you know, of either age or they're, you know, immune compromised or something.
Yep.
And it sucks because it's like, you know, it's hard. And I think it's taken away from, it's just taken, not the joy, I don't want to say the joy because that's going to seem over dramatic, but it's just taken a lot of the fun out of it. And even some of the like shows where we've done where it's like hundreds of us, like these big competition shows, and it's like now you have to work in your little bubble away from people and you can't be, you know, you can't talk to them or you have to, you know, and it's hard. So I would say COVID.
Yeah, no, and I will tell you, even on a set, in a set environment where you have most of the same people week in and week out, it created kind of these divides and groups come in at different times and you stagger and you're creating space. And that is just a kind of unnatural boundary to the normal collaboration and the normal connection. I know this year at the beginning of the season for the Connors, because we couldn't just high five or give the normal, just like, you know, you have these moments throughout the day where you share a moment with people. We couldn't do that. So I made little pins to give to all of the crew and to give to everybody, kind of so that they knew that they meant something. And we would do this thing where we'd like tap our pins or kind of motion to each other because I wanted them to know, hey, you're still part of this. We're all still part of this. We're all together. We're all one. You're still in my heart. I just can't, I don't get to come up and give you the love that I would normally give you. And so I was trying to bridge that gap a little bit, but it's hard. And it created a lot of weird, just kind of separations. And, you know, people went home a lot more right after production was over. And you didn't get that usual kind of hangout and decompress together time.
Yeah, that's what it's missing too. It's like you're like, okay, bye, and then you
Yeah.
just go. And
Yeah.
it's like, you know, even now for like lunches and stuff, remember when you could just like sit with everybody and like,
Yes.
you know, whatever, and you just, you know, talking and whatever. It's like some of the times we've had to like eat in our cars on the way to the next set. And it's like, it just takes away because like I'm such a super social person. So not saying that you can't talk to anybody, but like it just makes it hard because a lot of times I'm like, yeah, I would go out with people after work or like, you know, even just when you're taking a break and everyone's just chilling. It's like a lot of people now kind of go to their own little bubble and you're just kind of there. So that's taken away a little bit of the joy of kind of being on set, you know, but the good thing is like we are still able to do it
Right.
in a different fashion, but we're still able to do it. So, you know, there's some positivity there.
All right. Now, what's the best gift you've gotten from a project?
Ooh, yeah. I remember back in the day they used to give us swag and stuff. I feel like I haven't gotten swag in a long
Right.
time.
Right.
We used to have like shirts and hats, and you're like, I worked on this show and I'm so proud. When the boss, like when the EPs like really recognize what you do and they do like a big old group like thing for the group where like I
Mhm.
think one time we had like a big old just outing. They rented a location. We took down, you know, took over the restaurant and they just had a party for us, you know, and it's just like
Yeah.
that's showing the appreciation. That kind of stuff goes like a long way for me versus like, you know, here's a $50 card or something. It's like you just recognizing that we're doing awesome. And so you threw us a party, you know what I mean? Or one of my shows actually a long time ago surprised us all and they shut everything down. They shut down the office. They're like, everybody get out. They had buses and everything for us. And we were like, what are we doing? Like, no one knew what we were doing. This was the whole post team, everyone in post. And we were like, what are we doing? And like, no one knew. They were like, just turn off your things, get on the buses. So we're getting on the bus, we're grabbing, and we just show up at this place. I totally forgot about this until now. And we show up at this bowling alley and they just had drinks and food and free bowling. And they were just like, don't think about work today. Like you guys have been really
Awesome.
kicking butt and just like have fun because we need it. And that was like, honestly, like one of the best experiences.
It means everything. And I think it's something that is easily overlooked, but it's so important. And I know for you, it's one of the advantages, and for me too, of coming up through the ranks, is understanding that some days you just need that. So as you're leading, like that, those are things you never forget. Because it just means you were seen, you were valued, that people get it, that the work matters and that you're doing a good job. And hey, so let's go celebrate, and to celebrate together. How do you want the people who've worked with you to remember you?
I just want them to remember like my spirit. Like I try to, even in like the crappiest of times, or hour 15 of overtime, like, of time, like I try to find, even if I'm tired or done, I try to find the fun and stuff. It's like we get to do something cool, and it's something that a lot of people want to do and don't get a chance. And, so I just want people to just remember like my friendly spirit, just because, or my overall vibe, because again, we have our days, but there's days where it's like, it's not really that bad, guys. Like, look, we get to, there's stuff on the screen and we get to like create this thing for the world to see. And it's like, granted we're on X amount of hours, but whatever, we're fine. You know what I mean? And tomorrow we'll sleep, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Now you have kids. Actually, I don't, probably not. Some shows I've done where you're just literally working like daily, but hey, money,
work. It's better. It beats the alternative. That's how I always tell people. Beats the alternative.
That's true.
Okay, what's the legacy you want your loved ones to take from your life?
That especially with Black Vintage Media, that I wanted to find a way to make change, even if it's small, that I did, that I see stuff in people that maybe other people don't see. And that I, am there to help tell their stories, but also just like get to know people, finding a new way to bring representation. So I would love my loved ones to see that I'm trying to make change, within my community, but also, I mean, women, people who are underrepresented, and that I did what I could to help to do that, to accommodate that.
I think we make our legacy every day. And it's so often in the smallest moves that we make and the little things we do from day to day. And you look back, I always tell people, like, you can't really see the whole picture. It's a lot like doing a puzzle where you don't know what the final picture is supposed to look like, because it's only years later that we really can look back and see the really beauty of the picture and why that setback led us to something else, or why this happened. But you're building a really, truly meaningful, beautiful legacy. And I am, let me say, I am thankful for this commitment that you've made, this push that you're making. And it is my hope that we get to work together, and that I get to watch you rise, and that the world knows what Black Vintage Media stands for, and that at some point it becomes the norm. And as you continue to break down these barriers, that the legacy is people look back and say, okay, Jada Ford, she helped push things forward, and that your kids can look and say, I'm proud of my mom. She made a difference.
Oh my gosh, that's so sweet. I appreciate it. And that's what I'm hoping to achieve and to relay. So I do appreciate you saying that. So thank you. And thank yes, you too. You're writing too. You're doing cool stuff. So yeah, I would love to see your stuff too. And see you flourish.
And that's the thing, is I don't plan on going anywhere. I always tell people I'm gonna be around for a long time. So get used to me. So thank you so much for coming on Fish's Call Sheet. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Like, I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and me able to share what I do to the world. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you liked what you saw, or maybe you want to know more about the entertainment industry, check out some of our other episodes where we dive into other departments as I celebrate all the amazing people who make production possible.